Welcome to our presentation on the benefits and uses of beta-glucan. I'm Mark Cochran, and in just a few moments you'll see an interview with one of the foremost experts on beta-glucan, Dr. Vaclav Vetvicka. He's come to us from the Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine at the University of Louisville to help us reach our goal of bringing you the information that will help you become more familiar with beta-glucans through an understanding of the immune system, some basic biology and chemistry, and beta-glucan's potential impact on wellness. Dr. Vetvicka has written a new book, Beta-Glucan, Nature's Secret, to provide both scientific and reliable information about beta-glucan to the general public. Now, everybody has heard something about beta-glucans, but most people's knowledge is limited and confusing. Some don't believe any claims, while some others have unrealistic expectations. Much of the information on Medline and PubMed is too scientific and therefore difficult for the general public to understand. Some of the information on the internet is commercially driven and inaccurate. With 25 years of documented research on beta-glucan, Dr. Vetvicka can help readers understand why a normal diet and typical food supplements will not perform like the proper use of beta-glucan. During his 25 years of glucan studies, he worked with a glucan research group at the Institute of Microbiology, Czech Academy of Sciences in Prague, Czech Republic. He collaborated with Dr. Gordon Ross, one of the true glucan pioneers, in federally funded research on glucan activities, describing the glucan CR3 receptor interaction and the concept of synergy of glucan with anti-tumor antibodies. Most of today's clinical trials are based on these original findings. He has collaborated to evaluate the biological properties of glucan made and sold in the United States, Brazil, Turkey, Croatia, Germany, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and the Czech Republic. Dr. Vetvicka is not selling glucan and has never endorsed any particular brand of beta-glucan. He wrote his book objectively and completely without any profit motive for educational purposes only. Any commercial names used in his book are mentioned only as a result of his own extensive testing. Now, after reading his book, one should have enough information to clearly and confidently decide why glucan is worth the effort and which glucan is the best to buy. This book is intended for students who have an interest in or are required to learn about glucan, for nutritionists who are looking for an improved nutritional regime, for readers who are seeking new ways to improve their health and to understand the confusing field of natural immune modulators, and for physicians who are interested in glucan and its action but have no time to immerse themselves into the vast universe of scientific publications. The field of glucan research is very active, with new scientific reports being published almost daily, bringing about interesting and clinically important knowledge. It is his desire to share the knowledge that he has gained with the public. We take you now to that interview with Dr. Vaclav Vetvicka. Dr. Vetvicka, thank you for being with us this morning.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now that we know a little bit about you and they've heard a little bit about your background and so forth, where you work and what you've done, is there anything you'd like to add to that before we get started?
No, I think it just covers everything I do and everything I came from.
Okay, so you've been here for how many years in the U.S.?
Since 1991.
Okay.
A long time.
Yeah, back before, I guess you came right after the wall came down, huh?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, you can say that.
Okay, well, we know that from what we've already heard that you've got a lot of background in research in beta-glucan, and probably, I guess, we'd say you're the premier researcher in this country or maybe in the world. And so we're very excited to have you here with us. We've got a lot to cover, so let me just kind of jump right in. What drove you to study beta-glucan over all the other compounds and things you could be involved in?
Well, to tell the truth, I was a little bit sucked in, because when I came here, it was a different project. But about 6 months after I came, the first commercial soluble glucan appeared on the market, and it gave us a tool to study it. And one thing went to another, and I just got it as a full project, and I stayed with it.
Okay.
So it was a luck.
Okay, so is beta-glucan a new discovery? I know a lot of people haven't heard about it, although just recently I think I saw a little television commercial with a little girl talking about oats for breakfast and beta-glucan. So it's starting to be introduced to the mass public, but most of us have never heard of it. How long has this been around? And
well, we have to remember that the glucan is a polysaccharide, and the use of similar substances in medicine started somewhere around 1890. But in that time, people really didn't know what they have, what they are trying to do. So really, glucan show up on the scientific radar somewhere around 1960.
Okay.
And it came in several waves, 5 years of intensive research, and people stopped thinking about it and started again in 70s, 80s. So it keeps coming.
Okay. So that's a little bit of the background of it in terms of how we've come to know it. But tell me, just what is it? What does it do?
Well, what is it? Is it just you can imagine it as a molecule of glucose, which is a common sugar, linked together in some kind of chain, and depending on which type of glucan you have, it's a shorter or longer chain, and you can have branches coming from it. So it's not a single or simple molecule, but it's not the most difficult or most strangest one either.
So there are different
types
types of
yeah.
beta-glucan.
And also different sources.
Gotcha. So why do you think, why haven't we heard about it? It's been relatively, you say, came to the market, or at least into the research in the 60s, but yet it's virtually unknown among the public.
Well, I wouldn't say it's unknown. And we have to remember that since 1983, it's an official drug in Japan, and it's used ever since. So the world knows. It's more that the Western world doesn't.
Ah, well, that's not unusual.
Well, it's a problem of the philosophy, because the Eastern medicine, meaning the Chinese medicine, Japanese medicine, is more interested about the results. So if it works, let's use it. Here in Western Europe, United States, we have to know everything. We have to know exactly which molecule is doing what, how long, how fast, how it goes in our body. And as long as we don't know it fully, it's not approved.
Gotcha. Well, so that leads me to the next question. What kind of scholarly research has been done on this particular compound?
I have to say a lot, because if somebody goes to PubMed or some kind of scientific database, there is about 100,000 hits now.
Is that right?
And I try to keep up, and making my secretary pretty unhappy, because about 50 papers appears every week. It's really booming. The research is really booming.
So it's gotten ahead of steam.
It does, because it's not only the medical use, but it's also used in food and other products. So it has a wide range of possible uses.
Well, I've noticed we have here on the table a couple of binders with many pieces of documentation, and we'll get into some of that as we go. But it's been quite impressive to kind of pour over some of this stuff. So I guess the next question from a kind of a foundational perspective is, where does beta-glucan come from? How do we get it?
From almost anything from the plant part of living things. The most common sources are yeast and mushrooms, but it's mostly based on the geography, basically. Because we, as a Western civilization, we historically drink beer and eat bread. So there is a lot of mushrooms around, very cheap. So we used to isolate the glucan from yeast. People in China, Japan, they use mushrooms as an old folks remedy, and they have a lot of mushrooms, and it's common to pick up mushrooms and eat them. So they isolate glucan from mushrooms.
Okay, so if I hear what you're saying, beta-glucan would be considered an all-natural supplement then?
It is fully natural. It's basically impossible to make synthetic glucan in the size of what we get in nature. It's just too difficult to make and too expensive to make.
So in terms of difficulty and expense, would you say what's the the yeast derived is probably the most popular, the cheapest, maybe even the best that's available?
The question of best, with respect of source, was for decades a thing people were fighting about, because of course the mushroom glucan groups were saying their glucan is great and the rest is not worth anything, and the yeast groups were saying our glucan is the best. It is more a question of how well you prepare it than from which plant or which...
right, so it's an issue of the process.
It's how you have to be careful and you have to be honest when you prepare it, sure. Isolate it, purify it. So
those that come from yeast, what are we risking yeast reactions and things like that in individuals, or is it basically an inert?
You don't, because the problems with the yeast infection, not only that the yeast are living in our body when they are doing the harm, here you have only part of it, but also the allergic reactions and stuff like that, it's on the protein or lipid part of the yeast cell wall. With glucan, you have just only the...
So it's actually just derived from the cell wall of the yeast, not from the entirety of the yeast itself. So that brings up another question in my mind then. Are there any side effects to using beta-glucan in the body?
Well, you can get killed with anything. You know, if you will eat it by spoons, anything, it's like a sand, everything can kill you. But normal doses, absolutely not. There were a few studies in 80s coming from Japan that you shouldn't take it together with aspirin or some non-steroids drugs. But that was never confirmed. And it seems that they had to use some particularly strange glucan, which they never describe in the studies, and also a special genetically strange type of strain of mice, which are not normally used and not really fully normal. So there were really strange combination of things, and they have used a massive dose too. So for our body, for normal use, there is no way how it be helpful.
No toxicity.
No.
Well, so if someone were to start taking beta-glucan, how long does it take before it starts actually having effect on the body in the immune system?
The effects are demonstrable at about 3 days. It takes about 3 days from the time we swallow it till it goes through the body and start to spread around the individual organs and cells. So in about 3 days, you should see the first signs.
So it's we would say it's an immune enhancer. Is that
yes? Yes.
So is there any way then, by taking it, that you can overstimulate the immune system?
No. You cannot do any harm with taking too much. The only harm you can do is just to your wallet, because you will be wasting money. But
so there's a point of diminishing return.
Yes, basically, because if you take too much, it will go straight through and it will be excluded by liver and kidney.
While we're talking about issues of possible problems, what about somebody who has an autoimmune condition or is a transplant patient that's having to be concerned about those kind of issues?
It is a different story. For a transplant patient, it's a clear no, because everybody who has any type of transplantation, he is on heavy doses of immunosuppressive drugs. That's a norm for anybody. And you don't want to have the immune system suppressed by a medication and stimulated by glucan at the same time. So for this type of patient, it's a straight no. With the autoimmune diseases, it's a little bit more complicated. First of all, it's about 80 different types of autoimmune diseases, and we don't know yet too much about them, and most of all, we don't know what is causing the disease. But it's still, the immune system somehow goes berserk and attacks our own body, and we don't want to stimulate it even more. It's very few studies, so we cannot be 100% sure if glucan would do any harm, but in this case, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Well, so the one, I guess, the beta glucan that we're talking about most commonly is 1,3-D
Yes.
glucan. Is that correct? So why is it called beta 1,3-D? What does that signify?
Well, if you remember, I was saying that it's like a string of beans. That's the chain of the molecules. But it almost always is in kind of branching. And depending on how it's branched and where the chemical binds are, it's either in position 3 or 6. And that's why it's called 1,3, 1,6. It's how it's bound together.
I see. So I know these are just going through some basic questions. We'll get into more depth later. But is beta glucan considered an antioxidant? Because I know that's really big now. You know, everybody.
It is. But in this regard, we have to remember that it's easy to measure how well it is as an antioxidant in tube. It's easy to measure. But once I swallow it, it's almost impossible to measure any effects in our body. So we know that it works in tube, but in our body, we just expect that it's working the same way. But it has the ability to act like an antioxidant.
So back to the source. So do you believe that baker's yeast probably is the best for immune support in terms of where to derive the compound?
I do. And one of the reasons is you can produce it in much larger batches than from mushrooms. And the yeast are the same every time. You can buy a wagon, basically, of yeast. Every single one will be identical. With mushrooms, you have to produce them. It's a growing plant, basically. They will grow differently every time you start the new batch.
Many more variables with the mushrooms than you would with the baker's yeast.
Yeah, and with a natural material, you want to have it as close as possible to have it the same every single time. Yeah. So that gives a big advantage to the yeast glucan.
So I know that the glucan comes from barley, oats, and other grains. That's been popularized here lately. Are those glucans that come from those substances, are they as effective as that which is derived from baker's yeast?
That's a good question. Not really. Mostly these type of glucans have a little bit different structure. They have much larger molecule, and they act more like a fiber than acting through the receptors. So that's why they are used for different type of diseases, mostly for heart disease, cholesterol lowering, and stuff like that, because they act differently. So it is still glucan, basically same molecule, but a little bit different action.
So you'd say probably pound for pound, the effectiveness is not near as great with those as it would be.
No, it's not. You usually take about 100 milligrams of high quality yeast or mushroom glucan. Here you have to take about 3 grams.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned, I think early on, about a glucan receptor. Tell me what that is and how that works in the body.
We have to remember that the glucan has to somehow get into the interaction with cells in our body, and something has to happen. It's not like the cells will be swimming in a sea of glucan and nothing happens. They have to bind it, recognize it, and start the signaling inside the cells to see some reaction. And for years we didn't know exactly how it's done. This part of glucan here, cell there, and now what happens? And that's why the appearance of the soluble glucan was so important for us, because as soon as we have a soluble glucan, we could label it and we could saw it in microscope and so on. And using it, we found that the receptor for complement can bind it, and after the binding, it transfers the signals inside the cells, and it starts the whole process inside the cells.
So maybe that's what we need to talk about just a little bit, is the kind of the mechanism for what happens. So when somebody swallows beta glucan, It goes through the stomach.
Yeah.
And how from there on, tell me kind of what the process is, how it goes through the system.
It goes through the stomach basically unchanged, because we cannot process this type of saccharides. Only horses and animals basically eating grass can do it. We cannot. So it goes through the stomach. And inside the intestine, there are small patches of cells called Peyer's patches. And they have a lot of different cells inside which have the receptor for the glucane. So when the glucane slowly passes through, they actively see it, the molecules of glucane, bind it, catch them, and suck them in. And doing it, now they have the glucane inside. And they start slowly to chew it up into the smaller parts, leave the Peyer's patches into the other organs of the body, releasing the fragments, and this way the glucane is slowly spreading around our body. And it takes a couple of days. That's why I said it takes 3 days to see any results, because it goes from one organ to another. Cells are exchanging the glucane molecules.
So then the main thing that, say, glucan, what we expect it to do is to take cells, T cells and killer cells and NK cells and phagocytes and all these other cells that are part of the immune system, and it kind of turns them on in a way that nothing else does to make them more effective. Is that?
Yeah, that's the best explanation. It's we have to remember that these cells constantly talk to each other. It's a constant interaction. They never work alone without thinking and helping each other. And if you kick up one activity, it starts producing different cytokines, different molecules, and the others are picking it up and say, yeah, something is here, let's work more, start divide, and so on. So you basically start kicking the whole system.
Well, that's really, it's a fascinating study, which I've done just a little bit of, and I've followed your work over the years. It's been quite interesting. So I know you've tested numerous types of glucans from numbers of manufacturers and so forth. Is there a place that we can all go to see those results about your research on these different compounds? Well,
I studied at least 50, maybe 80 different glucanes, all around, from countries all around the world. I had the glucanes from my home country, of course, but several countries like South Korea, Taiwan, Russia, Croatia, Turkey, you basically name it. I try to compare them together with some kind of best level, and if it's possible, I publish these comparative studies. There are at least 2 or 3 already published, so it's available online. They are available on PubMed, so it's possible to find the studies. It's out there.
So, tell me, you've published some of these studies and so forth in your book, Beta-Glucan: Nature's Secret. Do you have? Tell me about what you've done here, what you've revealed in this book. What if somebody picks this up, what they can expect to learn?
The studies we mentioned previously, and which some of them are here, are really the full scientific study. They are in peer-reviewed journals, meaning that I submitted the article and it's checked by my peers in the reviewer boards. They check the science, the scientific value, and so on. And if they agree, it's published. But it's not really readable for the general public. It's boring, it's too detailed, and there's a lot of information nobody than the expert will understand. And at the same time, I felt there's a lot of confusion up to some companies and manufacturers, which in my opinion are not 100% honest and so on. So I decided to prepare something which will summarize what we as a scientists know about the glucane and write it in some kind of easier or more acceptable way for the general public.
Readable fashion for dummies like me. So this is Beta-Glucan for dummies.
Well, I wouldn't call it this way. I think I try to be a little bit above that.
Yeah. Well, I know there are, probably dozens of companies that manufacture some type of beta-glucan supplement, and they all, obviously, of course, make the claims that theirs is the best. How can the general public out there that's looking for a glucan supplement to take, how can they tell which one really is the best?
You have to do your homework. If you just believe whatever you read on internet, you will probably be taken to the cleaners. First of all, you should never go for the cheapest product, because as we used to say back home, you are not rich enough to buy the cheap stuff. If it's too cheap, something is most probably wrong. So that's one thing which should warn you. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to buy the most expensive one, because you can buy the more expensive bottles than anything else. But don't go for the cheap stuff. And the second, really check the information, because the companies, either the manufacturer or the reseller, it doesn't really matter. If he takes the material and the whole situation seriously, he will give you the detailed information, how it's made, really how pure it is, how much you have really in the pill, and gives you some links to the research based on this particular glucan, not on the glucan somebody else made, on my glucan. If it's there and the information sounds good, you most probably you can get a good product. If somebody is, putting information, having a yeast glucan, and you see the reference for mushroom glucan from Japan, what does it mean? He just took something from the internet and put it on the web page. So do the homework, be careful, and you will end up with the good stuff.
Well, I think this, from what I've read here, this will help. This will help the public kind of sort through all the fog and smoke and mirrors in the marketplace. So, Doctor, we've talked about, you answered the question there about cost and what's our better value and so forth. I'm hearing in the marketplace about a micronized beta-glucan. Is that better for us than the others?
Not really. When I mentioned that there are fights between the mushroom glucans and glucan groups and yeast glucan groups about what is better, was also a fight about which size is better. And that was in time when we first tried to inject the glucan, which later was found it's not the ideal way to do it. And also we didn't know how the whole process goes. As I mentioned, how it goes through the cell and how the cells will distribute it slowly. We couldn't imagine that the big or really large glucans would really be able to do something with the cells. So there was kind of idea that the smaller might be better. But now we know exactly how the cells are chewing up into small pieces and releasing it, and it's caught again and go back and forth. So there is absolutely no reason to believe that smaller will do any better reaction.
So what you're saying is our body actually micronizes it itself.
Yes.
So that's an unnecessary process, even if it's even done. Is micronization, is that even a thing? Do we know if that's actually being done?
Most probably it's not. We have to remember that a lot of companies are to some extent hiding behind claims of patented manufacturing processes. They are not actually lying. They have the patents on how to make it. And it's relatively easy to get a patent on manufacturing glucan, because you add one step, you change the temperature, and you immediately have a new process.
Sure.
You get a patent for it. It still doesn't say the glucan is better. And very few companies really have glucan and patents on glucan showing that this particular glucan they make is better in activity than the other glucan. So you can say whatever you want. Internet will take a lot of things, a lot of statements.
Sure.
But if you cannot back it up with a good science, it's just your private statement.
Well, that having been said, then how important is purity in the beta-glucan that we take? 'Cause I know there's variances in terms of how pure the product is that's being sold.
It is important. It is important a lot. Most of all, you get more products for your bucks if you have it pure. Because one question is how much is there. If you say 100 milligrams of 50% pure glucan is a different amount of 80%. But also, we have to imagine that the glucan, when we take it from the yeast cell wall, the major function of glucan in the cell wall is basically make it stronger. It's a little bit like the wires in concrete. And if we take it out, we try to get only the wires, but the bunches of concrete which are still there, if you have only 50% or 60% purified glucan, it's a lot of concrete around. And the cells with all the garbage around cannot really recognize the glucan inside. You have pieces of cell wall, you don't have the purified product, so it's not recognized by the cells, it doesn't bind right to the cell membrane, and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
So, that being said, some people might think, well, okay, that's fine. I'll just take twice as much of this 50% purity or 60% purity and save money. Is that a wise choice?
Well, it's a kind of type of general thinking which almost everybody starts to think. We did a lot of studies trying to either prove it or disprove it, and it just doesn't work. If you have bad glucan or low quality glucan, it doesn't really matter how much you take. You can take by spoon and you will still not get the type of reaction of the high quality glucan.
So then, if you have a purified, a good quality product, how much would you recommend that people take to enhance their immune system?
For healthy people, or with a normal health, regular health, the 100 milligrams per day is more than enough. The different question is if it's somebody who has repeated heavy infections or, God forbid, a cancer or something like that, you need a much larger dose.
Does that dose change based on body weight?
Well, of course, it's not some strict measurements, but for the normal size of guys, the 100 will be fine, and if it's a heavy infection, 500 to 1,000. If you have a cancer, 1,000, it's just probably the best. Yeah,
and we talked about this a little earlier. You've indicated that we can't take too much, but we may take more than we need. We may be wasting money if we take 400 or 500 milligrams, unless we have some serious immune issue that we need to be looking at.
Yeah, because in normal case, when we take it as a supplement, putting our immune system on the more active level, we still don't need to have it on absolutely full alarm. But in case of cancer, that's a different story. And we also have to remember that the cells of the immune system don't live too long. Neutrophils and monocytes in our blood live only for a couple of days. So that's why you need a constant need for constant glucan, because when they die, the new cells are appearing and they need the glucan again.
Sure. So is it more effective then to take it orally or intravenously, or what have you found?
The activity is the same. If you inject it, it's a little bit faster because you bystep the stomach and intestine processes. But from the activity point of view, it doesn't matter. And of course, it's much easier to swallow a pill than to have an injection.
Sure. So if you had the pills, the capsules, can you break those open and take it like that, or would it be?
Well, you can if you want. Not exactly sure why you would like to do it. The taste of the glucan, particularly if it's a yeast glucan, is slightly bitter. usually. If it's a mushroom glucan, it might have a little bit smell of mushrooms. It's not something which you would say it's really tough to swallow, but it's not exactly the most pleasurable thing. So it's easier to swallow the pill. The Europeans, manufacturers usually have a hard pill, not the soft, but it's more the tradition than anything else. But you can really break it and put it into yogurt or something like that and eat it with it if you have a problem with swallowing pills.
Okay, so we talk about people that have health issues they're dealing with. A lot of these people are already on some sort of prescription medication. Is it a safe thing to do to take beta-glucan along with prescription medications as well?
I know
that's a broad question.
It is a broad question.
To
We surely don't have a full range of studies saying this drug, yes, no problem, this drug, no problem. So we cannot say 100%, take it with anything. But the mechanism of glucan action are so specific, we really cannot say or cannot foresee any type of negative side effects when combined with other regular drugs. So it's always better to let your doctor know, don't take it secretly or something, because he should know everything about what you take. But I don't think we should be afraid of. We don't have so far any reasons not to take it with this or that.
So the next step, I guess I would ask, the next question I was asked is because I've heard a lot on the internet and other places about beta-glucan and cancer, because that's obviously the one thing that people are really concerned about, trying to find a way to help with that particular disease. So if somebody is already under a doctor's care with chemotherapy or radiation, what effects would they have from beta-glucan? Is it safe to take under those conditions?
Well, it's surely safe because, first of all, we have to remember that almost every anti-cancer drug is toxic to begin with. So we cannot make it any worse than it already is. But glucan can help patients with cancer in 3 different ways. One is it helps to take away the side effects of the chemotherapeutic drugs or irradiation. And we know that quite well because the original studies on glucan were really done on irradiation or chemotherapeutic damage of bone marrow. Basically, the people irradiated mice with a heavy dose or with a lethal dose, and they're feeding them or injecting the mice with glucan and found out that they survive. Basically, most of the irradiation or chemotherapy effects are destroying bone marrow. So meaning that the bone marrow doesn't produce the cells, and we got anemic, and we have no cells to fight infection. Glucan strongly stimulates the bone marrow. They produce much faster, much stronger. It can go back in, let's say, a week instead of 2 months. So you might not even lose hair without chemotherapy and stuff like that. So it helps to get rid of the side effects. It's not curing, but it's helping. Other help is the stronger immune system is helping to fight cancer. It might be not enough, but again, it's another step, another help. And with cancer, trust me, you need
all you can get.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
And I saw there's a video out online talking about the process of beta-glucan, how it works. It shows the Peyer's patches and that process. And one of the things it mentions is that beta-glucan helps, I believe it's neutrophils, if I'm not mistaken, that don't normally see cancer, and it kind of turns them on to be able to see cancer as non-self, which is huge. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, and another point, and this is just something which both the clinicians and the scientists are studying last, let's say, 3, 4, 5 years, is just to use glucan together with anti-tumor antibodies. That's a type of treatment which is really new. The monoclonal antibodies against cancer are known in practice, in medical practice for, let's say, 5 years, and they're starting to be used heavily. But they still are not 100% guarantee for the success. But if they are done and used together with glucan, they are suddenly 2 times, 3 times more active and more successful than alone. Either the antibodies or the glucan alone. They work together.
Well, that's exciting.
It is. It is.
It gives us a new option in that area. So, along those lines, and we've kind of touched on it, but I just want to hit it one more time. So far, we don't know of any reactions that occur.
Yes.
Adverse reactions with other drugs with beta glucan.
Correct.
Well, that's important. I know people are concerned about, adding things to the regimen that their doctors put them on. So I know another one that people are taking a lot of are these NSAIDs, the non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs like aspirin, ibuprofen for backaches or all kind of things. Are there any proscriptions for not taking a beta with those kinds of things?
That's a question I'm getting quite often. And I personally take a glucan for last maybe 10 years. And when I'm just getting old, no doubt about it. So when my back hurts, I take ibuprofen or some version of it, and I don't stop glucan taking. It's just
well, actually, I do too. I take glucan every day,
yeah. and
I haven't had any problems.
So I don't think so. It just it's basically impossible to do any significant harm.
Yeah. So the question that kind of overarches our whole discussion is, I think, probably the answer is obvious, but who, in your estimation, who will benefit from taking beta glucan?
There are people which are under heavy stress or are, let's say, working in some kind of extreme conditions, firefighters, somebody in glass work or metal working people, a lot of physical exercise. They need, again, any help they can. And
what's struck me since I first heard about beta glucan many years ago is that there are all kinds of things going on inside your body you may not know about. So you may say, I'm healthy as a horse, but you may not actually be. So for me, I've always felt like it was a great preventative measure. So you don't get overtaken by some of these opportunistic things that are out there.
Yeah, I think that you are right. You never know. And sometimes people say, well, I took it for 3 weeks and didn't see anything, which might be completely true. If there is no disease,
sure,
you wouldn't see any problems anyway. If there are no problems, you don't see any real effects. But at the same time, there will be a flu season coming. You have to be prepared.
Well, I look at it and say, well, I ate breakfast this morning and I still feel as good as I did yesterday. Well,
yeah.
Of course you do.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about those people that you mentioned stress and other things, but we think of those people that have come under some injury or surgery or something like that. What benefit can be realized by those people?
If it's a injury, like you kick your thumb somewhere, it probably will not help you too much. The surgery is a different story. Every type of surgery is dangerous from the point of view of infection, probably more than from the original injury or some kind of error of the surgeon or something like that. The possibility of getting infection in hospital is significant and getting worse every time. So if you are on the glucan, basically the immune system is much more active and ready to fight any type of infection which might occur. So again, you are ready for something which might or might not happen, but it's better be to prepare.
So what about those people that we think about now today? One of the biggest things we see on television is these extreme sports, weightlifters, people that running, do double marathons or triathlons or Ironman competitions, those kind of things. And so the muscle fibers are constantly being broken down, and they, of course, many times have strains or twists or pulls or those kind of things. What kind of benefit could an athlete and be able to see?
There are actually scientific studies showing the beneficial effects of glucan in this type of I think it was the people running the marathons, because they are really a running machine. They are perfectly prepared for the running or heavy lifting or something like that. But being prepared for that basically doesn't mean that the immune system is up to the same level. Actually, it's getting worse because there is a strong connection between the immune system. It's not working alone. It always works together with the central nervous system, which people usually don't recognize, but also with all the hormonal systems. It's kind of mutual cooperation. And if you push something to the extreme, the other part usually suffer. So it will help them just to be healthy. It's actually known that these athletes are, from the disease point of view, not really healthy guys.
Yeah.
So they really need to,
because all their systems are probably under stress.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those kind of things, especially you take bodybuilders and people like that, they concentrate so much on one aspect of their body.
Forget about the rest.
That some of the other gets forgotten. So another popular thing, obviously we think about cancer is huge. The other is huge is people that have issues with their blood sugar, cholesterol, things like that. Is there any benefit?
In case of cholesterol, it is really demonstrated both on animals and many times on humans. It does help. It's of course it's not on the level of any lipid or statins. It's not so strong. You cannot expect that start popping pills and you will have 50% drop in 2 days. But if you really take it, and there the grain glucans are much more studied, so we know more about them, are really working and give you the 10% drop if you take them daily. But you have to take a little bit more than one small pill. It's really in gram quality. But also it's already recognized by the FDA, and that's why you see the claims on TV, and
right,
because it's officially approved to claim it.
So we know that beta-glucan can help with many different conditions, but I think from my understanding, your main research topic has been beta-glucan in cancer. Now, why is that? What's driven you to study that specifically?
We as a scientists are to some extent science is a little bit like a prostitution. You go where the money can be. And we cannot work in any vacuum. We can only do the science if we have money for it.
Sure.
And
it's market driven like everything else.
Yes, basically it sounds sad, and to some extent it is, but the type of research done 150 years ago, somewhere in a garage and basement, people, like Pasteur and Röntgen and these guys, basically almost without any money, and, you look what they found. It doesn't work this way anymore. It's so expensive. You have to get the resources, you have to get grants and so on. And to get grants basically means that the foundation giving the grants have to find out the money somewhere. And there are lobbying, this disease is more important, pouring money there. So that's why most money really in the last decade or maybe 2 decades are used for the cancer research. And because of cancer research, we as glucan researchers are just doing the same thing.
Sure. Well, one of the questions that has come up various times is people ask, how does it work so well with cancer when it's actually a type of sugar or a sugar derivative, whatever, that cancer tends to thrive on sugar? How does beta-glucan work in that environment?
The whole question of cancer and sugar, it's not so clear-cut how it usually sounds and what you can see in some of the newspapers, because if the cancer can be cured or stopped by us stopping eating sugar or things with sugar, we would all be healthy, and the cancer would disappear because we would just stop eating it. So it doesn't really work this way. You cannot say, I will just not take any sugar for the last 2 years or for the next 2 years and I will never get a cancer. It doesn't work this way. So that's one thing. And second, the glucan, there are glucose molecules, but they are not linked in the way like in sugar, which we used to eat as a sugar. Sure. That's why it's also even not a sweet, why it's bitter. So it's a sugar more in the chemical way or chemical names, and actually you cannot sweeten a coffee with it.
Okay. So, is it true that some hospitals now and anti-cancer clinics are using, in the U.S. anyway, starting to use beta-glucan? Is that? It's
more a question of how either educated or open-minded the individual doctors are. If you find somebody who is really willing to go the extra step and read the material which is there, he quite often will say, okay, it's not a bad idea, let's try it, let's do it. If you find an oncologist who is rigid and say, no way, they didn't taught us that in the medical school, absolutely not, he will say no.
But there are some folks that are maybe using it as an adjunct to what they're normally doing?
Yes, there are just people who are starting to believe even in the medical profession. Mm-hmm. It's just the research is giving them tools to understand that we are not, dreaming some kind of garbage at night and putting it on papers. So they're starting to believe us.
So have there been any controlled trials and research on beta-glucan?
Right now there are, as far as I know, about 50 clinical trials running all around the world.
They're operating right now as we speak.
Right now, all around the world, not only in the United States. It's a little bit easier to find them in the United States because there is a database of clinical trials. Sure. It's much more difficult to find them around the world. Usually you have to get to the companies or to hospitals, but they are done. A lot of the clinical studies right now is of course, on cancer. And so far the results are very promising, both alone or with monoclonal antibodies. This is the newest trend. But there are also clinical trials running showing that it helps, let's say, children with respiratory problems. Months on glucan return their quality of life and levels of immunoglobulin to the level of normal kids.
Well, that was the next question I was going to ask you about children. What studies have been done with beta-glucan in children? Because everybody's concerned about that, and especially about the safety of beta-glucan with children.
And if you say children, let's say thinking about something like 6 to 12, 16, not really 1-year-old, it's most probably no reason why to feed a 1-year-old children with a glucan. It would be absolutely close to impossible to figure out how much, and so it's not really necessary. But plus the immune system is so undeveloped around year 1, who knows? But let's say from 3 years old, there's no reason, if there is a need. If it's a healthy kid, you probably don't need to have some kind of prophylactic glucan dose. But if there is ear infection, very often it's better to try it, particularly when the pediatrist would say that the immune system is not up to the level it should be. But the clinical trials on kids are right now on the age, let's say about from 8 to 15, and they are already published, and the results look great.
What about, I've heard some rumblings out there about some topical beta-glucans. Are they beneficial? Is there any reason to use those?
It is strangely, it is heavily used in the cosmetic industry. You now can find glucan in almost any type of creams and eye drops and whatever the women use. To some extent, it's used as a filling material because of the fiber properties. Also, because of the molecule of glucan is a little bit strange. It's you can boil it, let's say. It changes the molecule. It cools down. It goes back to the same. It has elasticity in it, so it helps in creams too. There are studies, not many, but there are published studies showing that it increases the elasticity of skin, less wrinkles and stuff like that. I didn't do anything like that, but I saw the studies and they look quite legitimate. So it's surely not a bad thing to do. I did one study with a high school student once, and she was basically having a cream with glucan and putting on skin cancer of mice, and significantly helped them. I don't know why, I don't know how. It was more anecdotic than anything else, but it did work. So I was surprised more than she was. But that might be the next step.
Well, so in looking at all that we've spoken about, how does beta-glucan compare, in your estimation, to other immune system supplements that are out there?
Well, this is relatively easy to answer. Glucan has one a really big advantage. It's the most studied immunomodulator or natural immunomodulator from all. The biological studies goes to tens of thousands. If you think about anything else, you might have find 10 papers, 15 papers. So that's one thing. You might not believe in scientific studies from one group, or you might say that if it's coming from China, it's not good, or their science, these scientists are not good. But if you have 10,000 papers from all around the world, they cannot just...
Hard to ignore.
Yeah, and these guys couldn't just, start to think something from the hip. And that's one thing. And the second is... the glucan is a simple molecule from a relatively simple source. Even if you have relatively low purity, you still have 65% of pure glucan in it. If you take any medical plant or medicinal plant, the people do, they boil leaves or they boil the roof, sometimes the whole plant. You never know. And that's it. They call it extract of this plant or extract of that plant. You might probably have 50, 100 different molecules inside. You don't even know which 100. Some will have stimulating effects. Some will have opposite effects. Most will have no effects. And nobody has money or even inclination to find out which of the 100 is the active one. So you are more thinking about what your grandmother maybe told you. Yeah, you cut your finger, put this plant on it. But the science behind this is not there yet.
So there are a lot of common supplements that people take for their immune system, like echinacea and colostrum and vitamins and who knows what. A lot of supplements that are combinations of all those things. So how do they compare to beta-glucan in your estimation?
We did a couple of studies and we published them comparing individual glucans to individual modulators like echinacea. That's one example. Most of the clinical studies of that plant failed because one company is using the leaves, one is using the roots, and each has a different quality inside. So you never know what you get. With the mixtures, it's even worse because some manufacturers are just trying to either increase the price, saying we put 5 things together, so it's not $30, it's 50. Or some are just putting it together, we give you more material for your money. But none of them is actually doing any research that, we really should put this and that. So it's very little research done on what will be better if you combine it. With glucan, we know at least 3 substances which will work better together. But with the artificial mixtures, you are on your own. And we did the study, we compared it, and the mixtures were always on the bottom of the list.
So can beta-glucan act as a prebiotic to help feed probiotics? I know people are taking a lot of probiotics these days. Any benefit to those two?
Our research, and saying our, I mean the science in general, is just in the beginning in this particular type of research. We are not really sure. There are studies suggesting it most probably will have beneficial effects, but compared to other studies we were talking about, we are just in the beginning. So we don't know, but we expect it will be helpful.
So if I'm a generally healthy person, but I'm starting to get up in years where, like we both are, in our 50s, and so I start taking beta-glucan, how can I know that it's working? What will I see? Will I see any effects? How will I know it's benefiting me?
It depends on how healthy you actually are. We might think that we are healthy, and we might not be. So, but if you don't feel any problems and anything like that, you might not see any effects for the next 10 years. But the thing is that you might be exposed to 5 guys with the flu tomorrow and another guy with this disease and that disease. And because of that, because of you are taking glucan, your body, your immune system is prepared and you didn't catch it. So you will never know that it didn't happen, but you basically sailed straight through the problems. So you cannot say, I take it and I will know for sure that the effects are there. You don't know what you didn't get because of that.
Sure. So I want to go back to something we talked about earlier and maybe help define it for the people a little bit. Can you help define for us what an immune modulator is, what it does?
It is kind of general term, which I don't even think it's just too elegant or anything like that. It is, if it's a natural, meaning the molecule has to come from a natural source. Sometimes you can have a modulator which is completely synthetic, but the term immunomodulator means that it's something which either in the plastic tube or in our body will modulate or change individual parts of the immune system so it works differently. You can basically consider even an immunosuppressive drug an immunomodulator because it modulates the immune system. So it's better to talk about if it's a stimulator or suppressor. But it is something which will affect our immune system and change its activities and abilities. So
from your research, of course, beta-glucan affects it in a very positive way.
Yes. And in our body, we usually need a positive way. We need a stimulation. Only in cases like we talk about autoimmune diseases or transplantation, we need the opposite. We need to suppress the system so the system is not fighting the new kidney.
Yeah, and I think in today's world, especially when we're all bombarded by pollutants in the air and the water and our stresses at work and other things that we do, it's probably pretty important to do everything we can to boost the immune system.
It is. It's something which is usually neglected, but for a lot of our problems in last decades, they are our problems. It's a situation where we live, the conditions, how we live, what we eat, the pollution in the air, water, and so on. It's causing the diseases. It's a common knowledge even about the allergic diseases. There are dozens of studies from Iceland where for decades was very little allergy in Iceland. They have no trees. Grasses they don't have the allergic pollen and so on. So the level of allergy in Iceland, particularly among kids, was maybe 1/10 of what's found in Europe or United States. And last decade, the conditions change they still don't have trees, they still have the same grass, but they're eating differently, they have a bigger towns, factories, and so on. And now, last 2-3 years, the level of allergies in Iceland kids is identical to Western Europe. So you change the condition, change the food, you just are not healthy like you used to be. So we have to think about it. We can hardly change how clear the air or will be. We might change the nutrition a little bit. We might change what we eat. We can go for better vegetable, something like that. But the conditions of the life will be the same, and there where the modulator can come and help.
So, what do you think beta-glucan's place is in the future of medicine? Do you see a bright future for beta-glucan coming up in the medical field?
I personally think that in next 5 to 10 years it will be officially approved drug in a whole Western world.
Be a household word at that point. People will know what it is.
The question which I really cannot answer, I cannot even figure out how expensive it will be as soon as the big pharma will step into it. So far, they are sitting basically on the fences and letting the small guys fight it and pay for it, actually.
Yeah. Pay for the research.
Yeah, pay the research and the development of patents and so on. We can think that $30-40 for a bottle of Glucan, for some people it might be a lot of money. Some might say it's a yeast. It should be cheaper and so on, but it still has no comparison for $50,000 per month for some kind of anti-cancer drugs, and that's why also it's a little bit less interesting for the pharmaceutical companies. But I really believe that it will not take even 10 years before it's officially approved. And we have to remember that as we eat fish, particularly salmon, if it's not wild caught, you can bet it's already fed with glucan. Most of the commercial farmed fish are fed with glucan heavily.
Are they using yeast
glucan? Yeah, there are just there is a huge surplus of yeast both in Europe and in the United States. The breweries have nothing to do. You can get a truck of yeast for $5, basically. And so they're giving it up. It's whole ships going to Norway.
Because it's a byproduct.
It's a byproduct, yeah. It's left over, basically. And so it's shipped to Norway. They produce a glucan out of it and are selling it to the commercial fisheries. And it helps the salmon just to stay healthy in this farming.
That's interesting.
So I would say about 80% of salmon production is on glucan medication.
Yeah. So Dr. Vetvicka, we've talked about adults and people with compromised immune systems and children, but I know there are a lot of people out there that are concerned about their pets, their dogs, their cats, their birds, whatever. Is any benefit to them to be administering beta-glucan to their animals?
Oh, sure it is. Don't forget that all the research started on animals. We never use it in humans for maybe 20-25 years. So it does work in animals. It actually works in any animal you can think of. It might be even one of the oldest modulator or stimulator of the immune system we know. It is heavily used, for example, in commercial farming of shrimps. So if it works on shrimps and fish, we were talking already about fish, you can be sure it works on your home dogs or cats.
So essentially, I think what you're saying is that the immune system across the board, from mammals to fish to birds, it's all basically works the same way.
With vertebrates for sure. But some of the basics and the cells involved in the immune system are the same, even if you go much lower on the evolutionary scale into invertebrates. The glucan still works and still stimulates the system. So I'm using it for our dog, and he's healthy, he's 10 years old and healthy like ever. And for any animal you can think of, because it's now it's getting more and more commercial use. There are a lot of studies on farm pigs or farm chicken, and it has a strong potential there.
Good. Well, so the obvious question, of course, a lot of people have asked about a lot of supplements and things, is can I just eat a better diet, eat more vegetables, eat more salads, eat things that are more natural, more organic, and achieve the same effect as taking an oral beta-glucan?
It will not be the same effect. If you change the diet, change it from bacon to carrot or something like that, of course it will do the body good. It will not save you for any
don't say
diseases.
bad things about bacon.
No,
we love bacon.
But it's with the food always in moderation. But also any help we can offer our body is just kind of cumulative effect. Nothing is 100% cure or anything like that. It's no magic bullet or anything like that. You have to keep adding. You help a little bit here, you add something, help there. So with a better food, organic food, for example, or a farmer's food on farmer's market, it's a more healthy food, and it's another help. But none of them alone will save us completely.
Sure, just more ammo in our arsenal.
Yes,
to
basically.
Help our immune system. As we kind of wrap up, everybody wants to know, I certainly do, what are you working on now?
Right now I'm still comparing the individual glucans and to figure out which is the best, and particularly how to use it for the children, let's say school age children, because particularly from the parts of countries where it's a heavy pollution, their respiratory system is breaking down fully, and glucan there, it seems to be extremely active. So I'm right now doing on this, trying to help them just to go back to the normal, regardless how bad the situation of their location basically is. So that's something I'm working right now.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed talking to you. I think we've learned a lot, and of course there's much more to learn. We'll see more in the future, but I would certainly recommend that you take a look at Dr. Vetvicka's book, Beta-Glucan, Nature's Secret. It's available Amazon, bookstores, so you can find it there. Just search for him, and I think it'll be, if you're interested in immunology and the body and immune modulators, it's certainly a wealth of information. So thank you so much for being with us.
It was a pleasure.
Now that you have seen the interview, I think a little background on the University of Louisville and its ongoing research might be in order. The University of Louisville is a public university, a member of the Kentucky State University system. When founded in 1798, it was the first city-owned public university in the United States and one of the first universities chartered west of the Allegheny Mountains. The university is mandated by the Kentucky General Assembly to be a preeminent metropolitan research university. Researchers from the University of Louisville Health Sciences Center participated in the development of a highly effective vaccine against cervical cancer in 2006, the first fully self-contained artificial heart transplant surgery, the first successful hand transplantation, and the development of the pap smear test. The University Hospital is also credited with the first civilian ambulance, the nation's first accident services, now known as an emergency room or ER, and one of the first blood banks in the United States. It is here at this well-established research university that Dr. Vaclav Vetvicka, PhD, is a professor and director of research. Dr. Vetvicka graduated in 1978 from Charles University in Prague in the Czech Republic with an advanced degree in biology and obtained his PhD in 1983 from the Czechoslovak Academy of Sciences, Institute of Microbiology in Prague. He is a member of the Czech Immunological Society, American Association of Immunologists, International Society of Developmental and Comparative Immunology, and American Association for Cancer Research. In 1984, he was awarded the Distinguished Young Scientist Award of the Czechoslovak Academy of Sciences. In the 1980s, he spent 18 months as a research associate in Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation in Oklahoma City. He has authored or co-authored more than 200 original papers, several review articles, and he holds 8 patents. He is a co-author of the books Evolution of Immune Reactions, Immunology of Annelids, Aspartic Proteinases, Methods in Cellular Immunology, Evolutionary Mechanisms of Defense Reactions, and beta-glucans as Natural Biological Response Modifiers, and co-editor of the books Immunological Disorders in Mice and Immune System Accessory Cells. Dr. Vetvicka is currently involved in research on the role of procathepsin D in cancer development, the role of glucan in NK cell activation, and the phylogenetic aspects of defense reactions.